All right, we might as well go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to the CPP by the Fire webinar. It's more or less going to be a free training session for everybody on our CPP tool that I built. We're gonna go through the tool, hopefully show you guys some tips and tricks, and walk through some case studies of how to use the tool to solve the CPP question for you, people you know, or for your clients. We'll also talk about some of the differences between our tool and some of the other tools and try to clarify any questions that people have in terms of both how to use the tool and how it arrives at the answers that it does. That being said, I'd really love for this to be an interactive call, so please feel free. I think there's a chat. Yeah, please feel free to make use of the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it. I'd love for this to be interactive. I want people to get the most out of this. And yeah, and I'd rather it not be an hour of me talking to a screen. But if that's what it is, that's okay too. Yeah, so let's get right into it. So this is our CPP tool. Probably most of you guys have seen it at this point. That's probably why you're here. But if you haven't seen it yet, this is the link. I guess I can drop the link in the chat if you want to go there. Yeah, it's publicly available, so no issues. We don't collect your data. We don't, nothing shady, just completely free to use. And it really was built to answer a couple of questions. Number one, what age should I start to receive my CPP benefit? And two, what will my CPP benefit look like? So the default case when you load it up is for a 60-year-old that's collecting CPP and is working until 70. Now, the reason why I set the default to a 70-year-old retirement age is because it introduces a couple of different options. Primarily, um, there's the notion of post-retirement benefits. So in this case, if we drop the benefits age to 65, we see we have a different drop down pop up. And this drop down will let us choose what age to stop contributing. So for somebody that works until 70, they could start to take the benefit at 65 and they could choose to opt out of making future contributions. Now, the key is that they have to choose that. They have to actually fill out paperwork and send that off to opt out of contributions. And that's only available if you once you start to receive your benefit and are working and continuing to work. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of different options around, when to take your CPP, especially if you're working past, um, past 65. And the beauty of this tool is that it calculates all of those different scenarios at once automatically. As soon as you change any of these assumptions, it'll recalculate all of that, all of those different options of when to take CPP, and it'll tell you what is optimal. And you can tell what's optimal indicated by the star beside the age on the drop down. So in this case, in this case, what's optimal is deferring until 70. But if you did want to, for whatever reason, take it at 65, it's telling you it's optimal to keep paying into CPP and generate those post-retirement benefits. Oh, there's quite a few questions here. Aravind, do you want to kick it off? I don't know if you guys can unmute yourself. I'm not sure. So if you can, go for it. And also just to preface this, just for the audience here, there's a ton of advisors that I'm seeing as attendees. So just to let you know, the content probably will end up being more on the advanced side, but just to give you a heads up. But I will try to simplify it as well, wherever possible. So back to where I was, it's going to run all of these scenarios automatically, and it's going to give you the optimal outcome. You can flip through all of these um, different projections as you see fit, and it'll change the annotations here. So in this case, taking taking benefits at 60, you see those benefits start here. You see the contributions are being made all the way until 70 when the person retires, and then contributions stop. And you see the blue region here indicates that there are post-retirement benefits that are being generated during this period. The chart's also going to annotate the general dropout period for base CPP as well. And before I get into any further details, I do want to stop and pause for the most basic question that I get all the time, which is um, this tool is all in today's dollars. Both the historical contributions in this chart are in today's dollars, and the benefit is in today's dollars. So if you kind of know what you're looking at, that becomes immediately obvious because the benefit is a flat horizontal line because it's constant in real terms. If this was in nominal dollars, you would see the benefit actually increase because the benefits are going to increase with inflation. So just to get that out of the way at the start, there's tons of comments on Twitter from CPP haters that think that this is going to be peanuts when they retire, but it's all in today's dollars, so just keeping that in mind. So and that's also true for these statistics as well. So the total contributed is in today's dollars, the total amount received today's dollars as well, then the net benefit, and then the real internal rate of return posted there as well. So again, those numbers maybe jump out as being super low if you're thinking nominally, but when you're thinking about a real IRR, it looks more attractive. All right. So this is how you flip through the different outcomes in this chart, but there's also another chart available that gives a more holistic comparison. So this is plotting the present value by default of CPP for each different CPP age that it's looking at. So present value of CPP taking the benefit at 60 all the way until taking it at 70. And on top of that is this little green bar, which indicates the extra present value benefit that you get for continuing contributions. And hopefully this is made clear in the tooltip that will pop up as you hover over the chart. But it shows the lifetime present value um, by stopping contributions at the benefit age, which in this case is 113,996. But then continuing contributions all the way until retirement will get you an extra 10K of present value for the total on top of 124. And of course, this is present value of CPP. So this is your net benefit minus the contribution. So even though you're paying in an extra 10 years for PRB, the net benefit of that, total benefit minus contribution is still a positive 10K in today's dollars. So you see that little PRB bonus all the way until age 70. Now you can change this up and you can plot this differently as well. The lifetime loss will show basically the same data, but presented in a different way. So it shows the loss of taking CPP early. So taking it at 70 is going to have no loss. That's your maximum present value, but then it shows the loss in terms of present value of taking it early. All right, and then the last option is to show the benefit. So this is just a nice simple, what is the monthly benefit at each age of starting CPP? So you see, and plotted in the same way. So the blue bar is your base benefit if you opt out of contributions once you start receiving the benefit, and then the additional green on top is the bonus benefit um, that you will get um, for continuing contributions and getting those PRB benefits. Okay, it looks like the chat's fixed, so I'm just going to take a 1 minute pause and maybe let people type in their questions um, if they have any before I get too far along here. All right, George. Start with George. So CPP enhancements, yes. The enhanced CPP is in there already. It's not explicit. Like it doesn't, there's no visuals to show what your breakdown of base CPP to enhanced CPP is, but it's all baked in. Getting into the weeds here a little bit, but we're projecting ympe and yampe moving forward, and you can control those assumptions based on the expected wage inflation. So by default, we've set the expected inflation assumption to 2.5%, which is in line with PWL Capital's financial planning assumptions. And then the expected wage inflation, we're using inflation plus 0.5, which is a conservative estimate. Historically, wage inflation has been inflation plus 1%, but we're staying conservative here, not to try and overestimate the CPP benefit in our clients' retirement plans. So inflation plus 0.5% gives us 3%. And that's a conservative but also realistic expectation that we do expect wage inflation to outpace regular CPI inflation. All right. Link, I posted a link at the top, but just in case it didn't show up, I will post the link again. Oh, someone, yep. Sorry, Matt, I already did that. We're good there. IRR is real. I think I mentioned that, but it's easy. There's a lot to talk about, so easy to miss. Yeah, so it's a real IRR. And like I was mentioning at the time, everything is in real dollars, in real terms. Yes, Tanner, I'm going to go through some examples totally. I just want to give an overview of the tool first and hopefully show some people some tips and tricks that they haven't seen and also introduce it for people that are not super familiar with it. Where does the chart tell me when is the best date to take benefits? So in multiple ways. So starting with this chart as your default view, the star beside the age indicates what's optimal, right? And you can cross-reference this as well by in terms of the net benefit, right? So the net benefit went down and now it's up to 290. And it's the same as well right here. So there's the 290. It's the same, it's the same data, just found in a different location. But that's what it's using as the point of comparison. So you can see what's optimal just by the star. So if you just want to quickly enter your data and see what the best thing to do is, then that information is readily available. And here's your projection of what that will look like. If you really want to dive into the weeds and compare, contrast all of the different possible outcomes, you can use this chart to look at all of the different outcomes in terms of present value, lifetime loss, or the benefit. And you can dig into each projection and what that will look like for you. Okay, I might have answered a lot of these questions already. Maybe I'm not sure if they were entered in earlier and just kind of came through all at once, but I'll quickly go through the use case of taking the benefit at 60 and then stopping at 70. So setting benefits age 60, you see the benefits kick in here. Contributions are going to stop till 70. Why does wage inflation impact the benefit amounts if someone's already retired and no longer earning a wage? So wage inflation impacts the ympe growth rate. So the ympe, without getting, I mean, I guess we're into the weeds already in this talk, but the way the CPP benefits are calculated is based on the 5-year average ympe and yampe for CPP2 of the 5 years leading up to you taking the benefit. So if you start your benefit this year in 2024, it's going to use the 5-year average from 2020 to 2024. And that value is essentially the starting point of what your benefit calculation will look like. And then it will depend on what your specific earnings situation looks like from there. But that YMPE calculation is it's like the starting point of what the benefit will be. So projecting YMPE forward is how we calculate what those benefits will be in the future, and that's where wage inflation comes in. So in this default case, this person's 60, they're still working for the next 10 years. But during those 10 years, wage inflation we expect it to outpace CPI inflation by 0.5%, which impacts the benefit. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, so Dale asked about updating YMP, and yes, of course, 2025 YMP is already in there, and it'll be continuously maintained in the future with next year's and following years YMP values for sure. Dropout years, yeah, I'm gonna come back to the dropout years one. That's gonna be one of the case studies I do at the end. I'm just trying to knock out some of these questions first. Um, Asking about taking CPP at 60 and investing that amount. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I made a whole Twitter thread about CPP benefits versus risk adjusted returns of a portfolio. And I think all too often people compare the CPP benefit to the returns of a risky asset, and they're not getting an apples to apples comparison between a risky portfolio that may be expected to have a higher return than CPP, but those returns aren't guaranteed and they're subject to a lot of volatility. So that's why in order to compare, you just needed to use a different metric. I proposed the idea of using certainty equivalent rate to compare the portfolio to CPP, and in that case, CPP looks better in a lot of cases. So that's why we don't have that in the tool. Yeah, dropouts I'm gonna cover in a bit. Yeah, Neil, I'll quickly answer your life expectancy question while we're here. So you have tons of options, and I think it makes sense to look at this chart. I think it's kind of a cool way. It's a cool way to view it when you're looking at life expectancy. So of course, by default, we're going to use FP Canada as the standard in terms of life expectancy. So you can actually access this table here. And just for those that missed it, the little question mark beside the CPP title gives you a description that most of you probably haven't read and probably won't read, which is fine. But there is a link in here that links to the life expectancy assumptions from FP Canada. And this is the table we're using. So you'll see for this person who's 60 now, 50% survival percentile coming from the table. You'll see it gives a life expectancy of 89. We can cross-reference that. So 50% is the lowest, by the way, that FP Canada recommends. So for a 60-year-old male, you see that's where that 89 is coming from. Now, FP Canada actually recommends to use 25% or higher, which would put us at a 94 life expectancy. But we're using the 50th percentile just for, I mean, I think that makes sense for the masses. But if you're working with a financial planner, they're probably going to use something closer to this, which makes the benefit of deferring look even greater. So that said, you can by default use FP Canada, but you can also enter in your own custom value here if you want. So in this case, if you wanted to really look at a lower value, you could. The tool will warn you that this is less than FP Canada guidelines, but maybe depending on your situation, there's something valid that would lead you to use a lower life expectancy. And, I can't say whether that's appropriate or not. But the tool allows you to go there. And I do think that this is kind of interesting to look at as well, just as more of an academic exercise. But it's kind of interesting to see how the optimal outcome will change. So for an 80-year-old or someone who has a life expectancy of 80, in this case, the best case scenario is to take CPP at 65, and you can kind of see how this changes. So notice I'm just stepping up the life expectancy 1 year at a time. You can kind of see how this changes over time, so that it eventually converges on around 87, it looks like. It's pretty close, and then at 88, it's taking benefits at age 70 becomes optimal, and any point beyond that, taking benefits at age 70 is optimal. Okay, hopefully that clarified it. So Dale's got a question. Earnings tab. Yeah, so let's see this. So we'll jump over to the earnings tab and I'll try to explain what's going on. So we've got past and future income. Past income is backwards looking. It's in nominal dollars. So this is the only time anything is in nominal dollars is in this table. And the reason for that is because your CPP statement of contributions is in nominal dollars. So it makes it easier to just map it over when, you can just use that data to enter into here and you don't need to convert any of that. So just being aware of that. So yeah, you can enter these values. I'll change some of the stuff when we talk about the child and disability dropouts in a bit. But trying to answer Dale's question about future earnings and future YMPE, you can open this up here. And it's this year, of course, it being end of December, the future piece maybe isn't as representative, but you will find the current year's income and future income. And just as a point of reference, this, along with, like I said, everything else in the application aside from that nominal, the past income table being nominal, this is in real terms. So it's all in today's dollars. So if you expect your salary to be flat in real terms, then this line should be perfectly flat. The default values are YMPE. So that's the reason why they increase a little bit. Next year, YMP, or it's YAMP, I believe, is jumping. So that's why it's here. And then you see that inflation plus 0.5% showing up here. So that's why these values are increasing by default. It's not because they're in nominal terms, it's because they're in real terms, but we expect wage inflation to outpace CPI inflation. What's the reference source for wage inflation? Well, historically, wage inflation has been CPI inflation plus 1%. And our assumption is more conservative than that, with wage inflation plus 0.5. What if wage inflation is higher than max contribution? So if I'm understanding that question, I guess what happens if we assume future earnings are flat and wage inflation increases, and future earnings happen to be like, say, rate at YMPE this year, and then due to wage inflation outpacing it, it ends up being less than YMPE. Well, then those years you wouldn't be making the max contribution. Okay, Aravind just wants me to get to the case studies. I can do that. Um, yeah, sure. Okay, sorry guys if this is a bit all over the place. But yeah, let's jump to the case studies. So I just wanted to highlight, I guess, for starters, the base case of age 60. So like I mentioned, it makes the most sense for this person to defer based on the average life expectancy. That's really the main thing for this for the base case. But what happens if we, oh sorry, let's change let's pull this down to a young person. And this is what I really wanted to show. Um, so yeah, so for starters, the benefit jumps a ton. And you may be wondering why. It's a couple of reasons. One, we expect wage inflation to outpace CPI inflation, so the benefit as a whole will increase in real terms over what it is now for the young person. Um, and secondly, this young person will be contributing to the enhanced CPP for their entire contribution period. So they'll have 40 years of contributing to CPP 2, which was introduced this year, because they're working until 70. So it is an interesting case. So you'll see that the benefit ends up being pretty significant. So like almost like pretty close to a $50,000 benefit, like 44.6 in today's dollars. So yeah, pretty significant benefit. And I think that it's safe to say that CPP will be a larger portion of retirement income for young people, which I think was the whole goal of the enhanced CPP. So we can kind of see what that ends up looking like. Um, Now, if we want to shift gears a little bit, we can look at at those dropouts. So let's just say this person has a child, and let's put it at we'll call it 2035. And then because of that child, past income, or sorry, this will be future income. Let's say they were on maternity leave for the entire year and they didn't work. And then after that, we're right back up to normal. So you see that year then gets added as a dropout year, but then the benefit remains the same. So they're not impacted by that year off that they took to raise their child, which is exactly um, the point. We can make this clear as well by adding another child. Um, let's say it's way like let's say that there's a large gap. We'll call it a 10-year gap just to make it more interesting. So I also want to point this out as well, which I glossed over a second ago. This chart will automatically show you that 7-year period for which the dropout is applicable. So you see this first 7-year period show up, and then there's the second 7-year period for the second child. And that's why I purposely shows that 10-year gap so that you can kind of see both of those independently. Now, if the second child was born earlier, then that would just extend the length of time um, that these dropout years would be available. But we can just assume that they took the 1 year off again, and then we're still in basically the same spot with regards to the benefit. Now we could walk through the same exercise with disability. We can just say maybe let's do we'll do this similar, we'll do a similar age. I'm just going to re basically replace those child years with disability years, just to kind of show you that you end up in the same spot. So here we are with you know, basically the same benefit. It doesn't matter if um you know, if it's a child dropout or a disability dropout, you get to the same point, assuming, you know, you're available or you're applicable to have these dropouts. Yeah, sorry, thanks, Arvind. Yeah. So that and that kind of bridges the gap as well to another topic I wanted to bring up, which is what are the differences between this CPP calculator and some of the other tools that are out there, and this the dropouts being one of them. I don't think any of them handle it this way. Um, Also worth mentioning on this topic too that it won't always drop out these years. So let's just say, so say you're disabled. We'll just keep the disability thing here, but let's go back and manipulate these earnings. Like let's just say it was just let's say we're still actually let's make sure that it's higher than ympe and it doesn't drop out that year. Um, it's actually for each scenario, it's running through and it's deciding whether it makes sense to use those dropout years, like to actually drop out those years that they have available. So for the child years, for example, um, if we if we flip off disability for a sec, and we bring that child back online, how it's working under the hood, if we pull up this income chart, it's actually analyzing each of these 7 years that could be available to drop, and it will drop them if it makes sense to drop them. So that's why you're seeing only this 1 year dropped out because it was a low earning year, but the subsequent years were not because they were higher earning years. So it's doing a lot, all that stuff under the hood so that it makes the user experience simple. You can just enter in what your kid's birthdays and your earnings, and it will tell you whether those years should be dropped or not. Okay, so Matt asked about what happens if earnings, if you put in a like a super high earnings. Well, we can do that and see. Yeah, and it doesn't change the benefit because it caps your earnings at YA and PE. All right, cool. So yeah, so those were a couple of the case studies that I wanted to go through. Um, any other questions? Well, I'll open up for questions, and then I do have a more detailed explanation that I want to go through. Uh, CPAP disability, honestly, I'm not really sure. If any of the other CPP experts want to jump in. Oh, CPP, okay. Okay, so what if somebody has been disabled from 35 onwards? Okay, well, we could just walk through that, but um, we can customize this range. Here, let's take off the children to make it simple, but we can customize this range however we want. So let's just say, let's call it the same as before, but they're also disabled um, until 2070 or something. It'll show all of this as disabled, but then obviously we have to change the earnings accordingly. So future income, we'll have to go here and just drag this down. And then it will show all these years being dropped out, and then it's using the contribution years from the working years. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, okay, Nick, this is a good question about the earnings. So yeah, so something I also glossed over. The default in all of these calculations is that it's using both the employee and the employer contribution to calculate the total contribution, to calculate the IRR, to calculate what's optimal. It's going to use both contributions. So if you toggle this to self-employed, it's not going to do anything by default. And that was set up by design, because in reality, self-employed people aren't worse off, um, because the employee bears the weight of the CPP contribution. And I'm not going to get into that level of detail. But the point is that you can adjust this assumption if you want to. So you could change this so that the employer bears the responsibility of CPP and it makes the IRR look super amazing. I don't think that's really accurate, but if you're just modeling the cash flows out of your pocket for a regular employed person, then that's what it would look like. You can also choose a split. So you could assume that, say in this case, the employee is bearing it, so it's showing both sides of the contribution. In this case, it's showing just the employee side of the contribution, and then you could even do like some sort of 50-50 split if you really wanted to. Um, I would say for most people, probably stick with the default. And it's really going to only impact what's shown here on the chart and how these stats are calculated. Yeah, I think I've handled that. Um, ympe, that's possibly accurate. I know I updated the back end calculation when the next year's ympe results were announced, but I can double check that this table in the front end is also linked up to the latest. So good point. I can check that after. But it's not, just to be clear, it's not impacting the calculation, or maybe it would have $100 impact on uh on that 1 year, but that's it. The actual calculations behind the scenes are definitely linked up to the latest ympe values. Daniel asked about QPP, so that's a good one. Actually, before I go there, I want to reset this. I want to get out of this disabled case, but I do want to show off one tip that you may is easy to miss. You can create a customized link here. So just to be clear, it's right here at the top. It'll create the shareable link. You can copy that guy, and then if you want to come back to it, you can, and then there's all your that's where you left off. So for advisors, I know at PWL we have advisors using this and creating and doing this analysis and then sending the custom link to clients. So that could be something that's interesting for advisors. And for individuals that are using this, you can bookmark this for yourself and revisit it if you'd like. But yeah, let's just refresh this here and go back to the baseline, and then we can talk quickly about QPP. So yeah, it will automatically change the rules and use QPP rules. So there's a lot of the back end calculations are quite different, but in terms of the recommendations, there's the biggest piece is that you now have the option to defer until 72, and you'll see that here. It'll show this in the table as well, where you're now, instead of previously, like with CPP, you're just showing 60 to 70. With QPP, you're able to show 60 to 72. Okay. I'll try and read out the questions in case people are not able to see everything. Connor asked about big takeaways, big surprises. And I learned a ton building this. I kind of went into this built anticipating this to be relatively simple, but I realized quite quickly how complicated CPP actually is. And then when you combine that with the differences between QPP and CPP and all of that stuff, all of the different dropouts, and yeah, it got complicated pretty quickly. So I guess that's one big insight is I didn't realize how complicated CPP is, considering everybody and well, most people in Canada have to make this decision. And there's a lot going on, especially when you combine things like working past 65 and post-retirement benefits and then dropouts for children and disability. I don't know if most people are thinking about CPP in this way, which I think lended itself quite well to building the tool and helping get that information out there and helping people deal with this question. So that was one one thing that I immediately realized. And then in terms of impact, I kind of showed it earlier, but the one thing that was really that I didn't see a ton of information on is what is CPP going to look like for young people that are going to pay into the enhanced CPP for 40 years. And I showed that already with the case study, how big those benefits are. It could be, and we could just quickly show that as well for the QPP person. Um, for a QPP person that's 25, they're looking at over $50,000 in today's dollars for a benefit with proper planning. So for a household, that could be a six-figure income from CPP or QPP, I guess in this case, which to me is pretty crazy. It's a staggering number. It's a massive increase from where people are at today. So that was pretty mind-blowing to see when I after I built this tool and was able to run through the numbers on it. Yeah, so for most people, we're going back to the earnings. Sorry, and if you can't see this question, someone asked, which option should I pick here? Like, if you're a regular individual, don't even touch this. Like, don't need to worry about this. Um, it's really it's digging into the weeds. Like I said, the only thing that it impacts is this IRR calculation and the net benefit. You don't need to worry about it. You just if you're just a person that wants to know what age to start CPP or what will my benefit look like, it's completely irrelevant. So don't worry about it. If you're an advisor and want to like dig into the weeds on this, um, then I mean, I think advisors would probably have more insight on how to use that properly. Okay, Aravind asked to follow up on this, and Aravind is an advisor, so I will get a little bit more into the details. So Aravind, there's no taxes in this. This all this um, is saying what contribution do we want to include in the net benefit present value calculation. So by default, it's going to use both sides of the contribution as the total contribution, which is used to calculate the net benefit, which is used to calculate the real IRR. Sorry, if you flip this over to employer borne, then you see it's half because it's only looking at the contribution that's coming out of the employee's pocket. So I think that's not the right way to look at it in aggregate. But if you do want to just look at cash flows coming out of the employee's pocket, you would use this employer borne. And if you're confused about what's what, like what's employee, what's employer, just look at the total contributed and you can see where you're at. Like you can see pretty quickly that this is using both sides of the contribution. And you can see that those values are larger in the chart as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, and I guess to follow up, just to be crystal clear on that, the employer in this case, the employer borne, this is the employer borne, the employer bears the responsibility of the employer half. So it's only ever going to adjust the employer half. The employee is always going to is always going to have those cash flows coming out of pocket. Hopefully that clarifies. There's a question about when does it make sense to take CPP early? Well, I've ran a lot of these cases, and I'm always seeing using FP Canada's life expectancy assumptions. I haven't found a case yet where it makes sense to take it early. That being said, if you have a legitimate reason for having a lower life expectancy, like you have health issues, then that would change it. And like I kind of showed earlier, when you're using these custom values, you can kind of step it down and you can see that in these cases already, it makes sense to take it. And like the lower the life expectancy, the earlier it makes sense to take it, just because you have a lower time horizon of receiving those benefits. But again, if you speaking in aggregate here, if you have somewhat of a normal life expectancy according to FP Canada, then from what I've seen, it makes sense to defer. But also with the caveat that assuming you're still able to pay your bills in that meantime. So if you're retiring early or you can't work early and you can't pay your bills, that's another conversation. Question on will this automatically adjust the benefit for optimum dropout years for having a child, or does it default to 7 and we need to request the number of years? So no, I hit on this earlier, but I'll go back through it quickly. So if you have a kid, let's just enter it at, we'll call it 40, just so that it's out here. Now, yeah, so if there's this child here, sorry, showing the future earnings. So these are the 7 years here that could be hypothetically dropped out, and you see that it's not dropping them. But if we go through that and we actually drop out this year, it'll automatically recognize that that's a low earnings year and it's going to drop it out, and it's not going to change the general dropout. So it's automatically calculating all of that stuff for you. Link. Okay, show again how to use the link. Yeah. So it's right up here at the top, assumptions. Right beside that, there's this icon. You can hover over it. It says generate shareable link. You click it. This link pops up. You click the copy. See there, it goes to green and has a check mark beside it. And now it's copied. You can paste it here, and then you're right back to there. There's the dropout and anything that you've entered. So dropouts, expected inflation assumptions, disability, earnings history, all of that is baked into the link. That's why the link's massive if you actually look at it. It's got all that data in there. Yeah. Plan to add OAS or GIS. I'm working on a different tool right now that's going to calculate your optimal withdrawal strategy in retirement. And it's going to have the CPP tool built in. And so that way you can have your optimal CPP, you can have OAS and any assets that you have, and it'll show you what your retirement plan could look like. But I'm not committing to a release date on that. It's a work in progress. Okay. We're getting close to the end. Trevor's got a long question. Yeah, it's a really long question, but I think you're getting at the survival benefit. So that is the one piece that I don't have in the tool currently is the survival benefit. Um, and to be transparent, it's possible that it does change the decision, particularly if you're already receiving a survivor benefit. So in this case, if you're the default case and you're nearing on retirement, but you're already receiving a survivor benefit from a deceased spouse, then yeah, that it could possibly change the decision, because the maximum combined benefit is going to be the max. Like you're never going to be able to, so you could essentially lose some of that survivor benefit by increasing your own um, benefit. So that gets to be pretty complicated, and I do not have that currently modeled. Um, and then in terms of projecting that, it would be really tricky. And honestly, yeah, I haven't even thought about, well, I have thought about it, but realistically, solutioning for projecting both spouses CPP and then showing the expected survivor benefit several years down the line, it would be quite messy. Um, and I'm not sure how, off the top of my head, how it would even impact the decision if, say, if one spouse is projected to die a couple years before the other spouse. I can't imagine it having a large impact on the decision. What if you stop working early and not contributing? Yeah, it also handles that. Let me just go back to the default case. Let's pull this retirement age down quickly. Um, so you'll see the dropout years shifted, right? Um, it was dropping out earlier years. Um, just because all of the default earnings are ympe, so max contributions starting at 18. Now we're retiring early, so we've got this stretch from age 60 to 70 where we've got no earnings, and it's going to drop out those years. But you can also see that if you take it right away, those years don't get included in the dropout. So all of that's captured under the hood, and it doesn't really change the outcome. Okay. Um, Paul asked if a young person leaves their job to do postgraduate work for 5 years, do you go into earnings to reduce their earnings to 40? I'm not sure if I'm answering or understanding the question. Um, but basically you can assume whatever you want in terms of earnings. You have no constraints there. So you can enter your past income. If you had just a period of low earnings years, then those would be dropped out. I guess I could show that quickly. Um, so in this case, it's dropping out these years for really no reason, but the general dropout will change if there's like a period here of low earnings. So now it's dropping out these years instead of just, you know, the years at the beginning, because now these are low earnings years. How is CPP impacted if you have a pension plan through work? Don't think it is. Your RSP contributions would be impacted, though, but not CPP. Any other questions? We're just about at time here, so any last questions, I'll take them now. Okay, thanks, Jason. And shout out to Jason Yee. He was a huge help at the early days of this, back when I had some formulas in a spreadsheet. So shout out to Jason. Jason's the CPP expert. So check him out. Okay, cool. If anyone has any questions, feel free to message me on Twitter or something. I'm always happy to chat about this and to help people through it. Amazing. All right, thanks everyone.